It looks like
the wind rain is very heavy at the moment, and we're making a decision as to whether to come in or not.
Must be very slippery in the braking area, Peter.
The road is very slick.
Okay, we'll let Peter Williamson go. He has enough on his mind at the moment. And we thank you, Peter, for that report.
Barry Seaton's car in the pits, the man who made such a quick pit stop and got well up into the leaderboard. He's in the pits and it looks pretty bad. It's not just a tyre change, it's something more fundamental for Barry Seaton, which is bad luck for him in the unit parts car.
The last, or about 2 laps ago, Evan, Jim Richards, the lap time, of course, they were down in the 225s, 226s. Now they've blown to 237s and 239s. So they're down to 141 kilometres per hour.
As an average speed. Still pretty quick in the rain. Peter Williamson just in front, one of the Mazda RX-7s, which are adding a lot of interest to this year's race. Want to go a bit faster up the hill? Well, it's got a bigger capacity. It's in the 3-litre class, but haven't been running in front of me up to this stage. But Peter taking it a little more gently in the wet than the Mazda driver seems prepared to do. Mind you, the Mazda driver is a man of some experience. Car 40, at least the Terry Shield entry, or Ross Burbage, rather, the entrant from Queensland in the Mazda RX-7. Terry Shield been driving, and he's been a leading Mazda driver in this state for many years. And he's not prepared to let Peter Williamson get away. Their old sparring partner. Oh, you see the way the Peter Williamson's cars switch when he went from the wet to the dry. You can see how the track is uneven there. The shelter of the trees at the moment is keeping the track dry in places. And when the rain stops, it'll probably start dripping and make it wet there. So they're in for a pretty tough couple of hours, unless these conditions either become consistent with rain or it dries up.
Well, the dilemma of most drivers, obviously, you can see Peter Williamson's car fishtailing. He said he was considering coming in for tyres. The strange thing is that though it's showery on top of the mountain, there's patches of blue along the pit straightaway. So what do the drivers do? You can see the grey behind the drivers up that top part of the circuit. The sun starts to peek through. And look at the black gloom halfway down the straightaway.
And as we watch a little battle between Terry Shields and the RX-7 and Peter Williamson in the Toyota, we'll go back down to the pits for a talk with Ron Dixon, who had the notable misfortune to be one of the early retirements.
Well, Ron Dixon, what happened?
Well, something's gone wrong in the engine department, but I think it's something minor, and it's caused something major to happen, and it's just a pity, that's all. The car was going very well, and
one more in a long list of disappointments.
Yeah, apparently so. I saw all the previous retirements, and I thought, well, gee, you know, we've started 60th on the grid, and by the 5th lap we were, I think we were somewhere up around 25, so we got past 30 or 40 cars.
Any hopes or plans or possibilities of getting back on the track today?
Sorry?
Any possibility or plans to get back on the track today?
Well, no, I can't get the car back from where it is. It would take too long to do any modifications to the car to get it back on the circuit.
Okay, Mike Raymond.
Thank you very much, Gary, and a very, very disappointed Ron Dixon. And even more disappointed is Dick Barber, the American driver who came all the way out from California to drive with Ron Dixon, and probably come a long way to have a look at a race without actually competing. We'll take a break and resume to 1979's great race.
We're seeing a sight we saw in 1976 when Bob Morris won the race, but now it's only 2¼ hours into the race, and look at the smoke that has just begun to billow from the back of the Ron Hodgson Channel 7 car. That looks pretty worrying. A lot of smoke starting to pour from the back of Bob Morris's car. He's running third at the moment behind the other Tyrannas of the Holden dealer team, but that smoke is a very ominous sign. It looks as though Dieter Quester might get a drive again. He came out last year to drive with Derek Bell and didn't get it, and he's waiting to take over, but it doesn't look too good, unless it's just some sort of superficial oil leak, but I don't like the looks. Smoke from that part of a Tirana is not a good sign.
Bobby Morris, who wanted more than anyone to win this race in 1979. The battle, the rivalry between himself and Peter Brock. Morris, of course, taking Brock's National Touring Car Championship crown away. The feeling that he had when he won it, only to have Peter Brock go out and win the Repco Round Australia Rally. And then this was to be the decider, the Hardy-Ferodo for 1979. Morris at this stage continues on, seems unconcerned. Obviously, he'd be reading out his oil pressure gauge. So
yes. We'll have Chris Economaki maybe have words in the pits with Peter Malloy and just see what the situation is. But it can't be bringing any joy to them. They'll have to bring him in to try and find out what's happening unless Bob himself feels he knows what the trouble is and is prepared to keep on going. He's running in third place. Brock and Richard are leading. Grice Costanzo are up there. These after the last lot of pit stops. Morris, Cuesta in third place. Third place man, but look at that cloud of smoke. I can't imagine him continuing like that. It's getting worse. As he's applying power, you can see it pouring from beneath the engine. It's certainly not in the differential for that reason, which was the trouble back in 1976. It appears to be billowing from the back of the motor. Bob Morris can certainly see it in his rear vision mirror. You can watch then as you see him head on with his face looking in the rear vision mirror to see not if there's a car following, but just how bad is that layer of smoke that he's laying behind car number 7. This is the National Touring Car Champion. He wanted to become the Australian champion, he has, but equally he wanted to win again here at Bathurst. And maybe that trail of smoke issuing behind him means that he's not going to do it.
Bob Morris coming over the top of the mountain. A driver who throws everything to his racing. A driver who, away from the circuit, is a very, very quiet type of man. But I would think there'd be a lot of things going through his head at the moment, and certainly through the head of his team manager and engine expert, Peter Malloy.
You can hear the cheers of the crowd. I suspect they're the Alan Moffat fans there, the fan club, because they're not the sort of cheers that Bobby Morris's fans will be making. The most vocal part of the crowd on the circuit always get up in the hills where the action is the greatest, both on the track side and on the spectator side. And Bob Morris now going back down towards the pits. Well, this is a dramatic happening. The order, according to the IBM printout, was Brock in the lead, Grice second, Morris third, then John Harvey, Charlie O'Brien, Alan Moffat in 6th place, Peter Jansen in 7th, Barry Seaton in 8th, although he had a long pit stop around the time these readings were taken, Gary Cook 9th, and in 10th, Ralph Radburn, and into the pits, surely will come Bob Morris. No, he's taking a very wide line, seeing to go so slowly through there, but he's going on. Now he's coming in very close. We're looking across towards the pits to let them have a good look. Maybe they asked him to come close to the fence so they can have a bit of an analysis. And I would suspect in a lap or so we'll see Bob Morris come into the pits. Try and find the problem causing this terrible looking cloud of smoke, which will probably intensify as he puts the power down up through GTX corner. And that's just at the end of Athco Straight, maybe another 300 metres up the track.
Sight at all for Bobby Morris in the Ron Hodson Channel 7 car. Dieter Cuesta, the Austrian who came out last year to co-drive with Derek Bell, played the role that Dick Barber is playing this year, the role of spectator. And I don't think Dieter Cuesta would like to do 2 trips to Australia purely to play spectator at Mount Panorama. Of course, as we follow Bob Morris around, and we honestly believe he'll come in the next lap or so. 62 laps have been completed. Of course, the Coca-Cola bottlers around Australia put up $4,000 for lap 1 through lap 40. All 40 laps were taken by the Marlboro Holden dealer team with Peter Brock. And, of course, Jim Richards then took over. We're into the second segment of the race now, with the laps from lap 41 to lap 80, sponsored by Ingersoll Rand. And again, the Marlboro Holden dealer team are on their way to taking one of Alan Moffat's sponsors' money again for the 2nd consecutive year. So they're doing very, very well, and we'll keep you abreast of just how much money they're collecting hour for hour in this year's Hardy-Ferodo as Bob Morris comes onto Conrod Straight, and surely he must be ready to come into the pits at least for a check of what the problem seems to be. The Dick Johnson car that we mentioned before is just going back out of the pits and is going to come up Avco Mountain Straight shortly, but we're ready in the pits. It looks like a pit stop is on. Chris Economaki will be in position down there to bring us up to date with what the problem is. And here comes Morris, moves to the inside of the circuit, probably put his blinker on. He has it on.
He's going in.
Uh-oh, we've got problem up the top. John Harvey in car number 26. Looks like, yes, he's hit. Appears to be a section of concrete walling.
You can see how he's deranged the line there, Mike. The fence is back. I assume that's John Harvey who's done it. His car's there. Yes, it's very untidily parked. In the meantime, down in the pits, we'll concentrate here. But John Harvey is out of the race. Are you there, Chris Economaki? Plenty of action there in the pits as they're trying to find out the reason for the oil leak. Under the bonnet, they're checking. No one's quite sure yet just what the problem is.
And at least, even with smoke pouring out of it, they're going to give Dieter Quester a run. So his trip to Australia hasn't been in vain for the second consecutive year for the Hodson team. Looking all over it.
Not a good position for Dieter Quester to be in, to be taking over with something maybe mortally wrong with the car. There's the view of the second of the Marlborough Holden Dilham cars. It wasn't Johnny Harvey. Ron Harrop had taken over.
Of course.
And Ron Harrop is in the car, parked very forlornly there. He seems to have hit the fence going up the mountain, in the wet probably. I suspect it was the fact that he was still on wet tyres. You can see a slight rounding of the rear right-hand corner maybe there. And maybe Ron got caught out, fresh in the car, oil on the track from a few of the disasters that have occurred up the mountain. Water, slicks. And one of the very early laps, he's hit the fence and spun off. You see there where the impact has taken place, and spun off around the top of GTX corner, and he's now out of the race. And so the first of the Holden Dealer team cars is out. I don't mean they're both going to go out, but one of them is out. Peter Brock still leading, and still in the pits after a very long stop, Bob Morris, who's standing there, having handed over to the Austrian driver who was last year's European Touring Car champion, Bob Morris. Well, you can read it all in his face. He wanted to win here just as much did victory at Bathurst mean to him as taking out this year's National Touring Car title. He's had a great year, but this is the single most important race in Australia. Not just the money, it's the prestige, the fact that there's nothing quite like the Hardy Pareto. They're going into the back. Peter Malloy just instructing Dieter Quester not to go on the track, but to drive into the back of the pits. So the problem is a very serious one, and they're taking the car into the back of the pits. We'll be reporting on what's been happening when we return to the action here at Mount Panorama, reminding you you're watching the great race.
The car seems to be running quite well. We haven't actually had any times on it, but there you see the situation of some of the slower cars at the bottom of the mountain about to be engulfed by a couple of the larger cars. And when we talk about large cars, here we have John McCormick and the 9 Camaro, and right behind him Alan Moffat, who is desperately trying to make up time and swinging to the inside to pass some of these slower cars.
Wally Scott from Queensland is leading in the Celica there with the large cars about to go swooping by. Signal from the Capri driver. And up in the head of the queue is John McCormick, former Australian Gold Star champion. We very rarely see him in a sedan these days. He made a name for himself, of course, when he drove the lightweight Charger with the Repco V8 engine. But in the very pretty-looking Chev Camaro, as Chris Economaki was telling us earlier, 5,000 of these race in America. It's the most popular single racing car in the States. Alan Moffat posing up behind. The Ford is a heavier car, but much more developed for racing under the rules of Australian touring car events than the Camaro is at the moment. The Camaro running without disc brakes at the back because they're not as yet homologated for Australian competition, so they're compelled to run in a much more touring trim, whereas Alan Moffat's car, like the top contenders here, is a much more specialised beast. John McCormick certainly not just waving Alan Moffat by. He said, "Okay, Alan, if you want to pass me, earn it."
Joining us now in the 7 commentary booth is a fellow who had to go off to hospital for an X-ray, but of course we've seen a couple of the pit reports. Welcome back, Chris Economaki.
Well, thank you, Mike. I'm pretty sore. The spill I took off the pit wall, were it an Olympic competition, I'm sure I'd have gotten a 9.8 out of it. It was just beautiful.
A common H backflip, wasn't it?
Right. I'd like to make a comment on the level of driving here. You know, in the United States, we have a sort of a derogatory term for some race drivers. We call them gentleman drivers. That means they're slow. Here, I noticed the very gentlemanly way in which the slower drivers indicate the faster ones by. It's beautiful. It's nice to see drivers with that kind of consideration for their fellow men of the road. You don't see any balking. I haven't seen any balking yet. Of course, I've been busy down in the pits, but watching glimpses of the television. And I might add, your show, your coverage is very popular among the competitors. There must be a set in every third pit down along pit road, and everybody is watching it. But the drivers here are really first rate in the standpoint of 3 classes. Most racing in the United States is 1-class racing. They have 3 distinct classes, 3 distinct speeds and capabilities, and the drivers in the lesser classes apparently are watching the mirrors very intently. A comment about the rain. Alan Moffat is hoping for rain, which is rather surprising. I asked his wife, Paula, who serves as his pit manager, why this is, and she said, there he is now, she said that the car is heavier than all the others, and with some super soft Goodyear rain tires that they have available to them, the advantage would fall to the car in the rain, which was quite surprising.
He almost needed off-road tires then, Chris, when he was forced wide going up the hill. The driver of one of the slower cars was himself passing, and put Al into the embarrassing situation of having put both his right-hand tires onto the grass, which won't please him. He's already had one tire fail through having picked up a pebble, so he'll be worried about that. He'll be pretty annoyed with that little incident. He's now coming up on the Terry Shield Mazda.
I don't think people that sit at home and drive pleasure cars understand the delicacy of today's racing tire. It is extremely thin, and that's necessary because of the great heat generated. Were you to use tires as thick as pleasure car tires on a racing car, the heat buildup would be such that the rubber would boil or blister, as we say in racing. So as a consequence, they have to have the treads very thin, which makes them susceptible to punctures easily. If a car goes off the road and scatters some gravel or rocks on it, another car comes along and runs over, chances are it's going to get a puncture. It's got no reflection on the quality of the tires, just what's necessary for racing.
We have the Channel 9 Camaro, which is now marginally behind Alan Moffat, doing laps only 2 back, 28.7. So they've picked up, and it's good to see at least the Camaro invasion for this year. Down to 1 car, bad luck to Ron Dixon, who blew an engine early in the race, but there's one still out there running, and they'll get more competitive as 1980 gets on with the touring car title.
While you're talking of bad luck in the pits, the Gary Cook car, number 11, the Citizen Watches car, is being pushed to the back of the pits, so problems there for car number 11. We've just been speaking with Chris Economaki, bringing us an American viewpoint. We have with us British motor racing journalist Jeremy Walton. Jeremy, you've watched now for 2 hours, 32 minutes. It's a different sort of race.
It's a very different sort of race, but with the conditions that you've been having, it's had a little bit in common with Europe. The rain and then the drying track. It's put a premium on quick pit work, and there seems to be plenty of that.
We're watching, Jeremy, Peter Brock. I don't know what chance you've had to watch him on the television monitors, but what sort of impression do you form of Peter Brock?
This is an outstanding driver by anybody's standards. I think in Europe he would rate right among the top 3. In fact, among the current people racing in Europe, he'd be right there where he is now on that track.
Well, that's lavish praise indeed from a man who knows, Jeremy Walton, international motor racing correspondent, who travels the world, and that's his impression of Peter Brock.
Peter Brock, of course, 05, won this race last year, same co-driver, Kiwi Jim Richards. He loves the rain. Then again, he used to live in New Zealand. Peter Brock going up the hill once again. A very, very sincere young man, a man who has definite views on the sport.
Well, I guess I'm not really as relaxed as I seem to be on the outside. I obviously don't get the outward signs of having a bit of a problem of coping with the situation that perhaps Alan Moffat does. I guess that Colin Bond and I probably have a fairly similar approach to driving, or motoring, competition driving, that we just get in the car and do it. But I think that does not really tell the full story. I have to psych myself up, or don't have to. I tend to be psyched up fairly well before a race. I'm probably at my most nervous. That last minute or so before the flag drops is all hell. You're trying to sit there, concentrate totally on the man dropping the flag, and what you're doing in the car is all correct, etc. But once the race is underway, once you've gone that first 100 or 200 yards, you've changed gear, and you're off and running, I find that it's a whole new ball game. It meant a lot to me with doing well on the Repco trial. I think a lot of the cynics around thought that I'd blow up within 100 miles, but I wouldn't last. And I must admit that I was, although I was determined to do well, to prove that a racing driver was capable of winning a rally, that driving basically is driving, and although you alter your technique, your basic driving style doesn't alter. You're either driving the car nicely and smoothly or you're not. And to get out there and succeed in the Repco trial, to me personally, was a very good feeling, because I didn't really expect to finish, let alone win. The Touring Car Championship over the last 2 years has been a very high level of competitiveness, particularly between two teams. That's the Ron Hodgson Channel 7 team and the Marlborough Holden dealer team, and in particular Bob Morris and myself. I would say that in long distance races, though, that Moffat has probably got an edge on Bob as far as technique's concerned. Moffat drives very, very smoothly indeed, and Bob's finishing record, whether anyone likes it or not, over long distance races is pretty poor. He's had a lot of engine blow-ups, and generally the car just non-finishing for various mechanical reasons. And this, to me, perhaps points to the fact that Bob is extending the car beyond what it can take. And while it can take it for 80 or 90 kilometres, it's a bit difficult for the car to take that sort of punishment for 6 or 7 hours in long-distance racing. Moffat, to me, is the epitome of the professional driver. He's not a natural driver. He has to work very hard at it. And to see a man overcome that disability, if you like, and still perform, I believe you have to give the man accolades.
Gary Wilkinson in the pits with Bobby Morris.
And while Peter Brock is highballing it in front, Bob, you're sitting here next to me, which is not where you'd like to be.
No, I'm very disappointed because the car was going so well. We were really cruising along, and it looks like we've done an oil seal in the gearbox.
Well, you've got the car in here behind the pits, and the work is going on frantically. How long is it going to take?
Well, I don't know. It just depends what they have to do. Perhaps they're going to change the whole gearbox or just try and replace the seal. I don't know. But whatever it is, we're definitely not going to win the race, from the back of the pit.
Dieter Quest will be going out after this?
Yes, Dieter will go out and have a drive, but the conditions out there at the moment are a little treacherous because it has started raining again. And, we don't want to damage the car.
What about the pace of the race up until that point when it started to rain?
Well, we were doing it fairly easily, What we were doing was cruising along, conserving the car, and we had plenty of reserve to race for the second half if need be. It's all gone now, unfortunately.
Bobby Morris with us here in the pits. Let's go back now to Mike and Evan.
Thank you very much for that, Gary, and commiserations to Bobby Morris, who doesn't deserve such a bad break at Bathurst. But Bathurst, of course, is a unique race. It's different to all the other Touring Car Championship races. This race does not carry points towards the National Touring Car Championship. Of course, the title, the national title, is decided prior to Bathurst. And, of course, Bobby Morris wrapped that up about a month back. At the moment, we've got the 05 car with New Zealander Jim Richards, and in the pits we have the guy who hopes to win this race yet again, Peter Brock.
That car looks pretty good, Pete.
It's looking nice, isn't it? First chance I've had to observe it. I've just had a shower and fresh, clean overalls on, so I'm feeling pretty fit. And I'm glad to see the Richo's hoeing into it. I noticed he's got the wipers on. I hope it's not too wet later on.
Well, the competition behind you, they're hard put to try and keep up with the pace, and of course there's been quite a high fallout rate. Bobby Morris has got gearbox problems. They've got to change it. Dick Johnson stacked it into a fence. He is back on the track and running, so out of contention.
Well, I saw his car parked against the Armco coming out of the dipper there. It was there for quite some time, and very hard to ascertain, but boy, it seemed he hit that fence very, very hard. And as a matter of fact, I was just up there with John Harvey having a shower, and we heard over the radio that Ron Harrop had run off the road. I presume it's about where my car is there now. And
still up there?
Well, that's all we know at the moment. We presume it's pretty badly bent and out of the race.
The early stages of the race, Peter, people were very surprised at the ease with which you established that break.
Yes, it is. It surprised me, actually, because I didn't go to rip out ahead. I just sort of thought, well, I'm driving along fairly nicely. The car's doing it relatively easily. And I'll just press on and use 6,500 and put the brakes on when I want to. And I decided that I'd try pretty hard through the traffic. And I actually did get quite a bit of time here and there as the traffic sort of slowed other cars down. And eventually I think I was about nearly a minute in front at the end of my stint, which surprised me and made me very happy.
Well, Peter Brock and the Marlborough Holland Inner team looking pretty good at this point.
Jim Richards, once again, in the number 5 car, co-driving with Peter Brock. I was very interested to hear Brock's comments then regarding that they heard, they supposed he was off the circuit. Well, it's off the circuit all right after trying to bury the front of the car, of course, into the Umco, or into the concrete, rather, at the turn up there. Bad luck indeed. Another one going via...
Okay, maybe we can handle the index of performance too. I believe that IBM have got those figures now too, Phil. We might explain that. More credit to good performances is to bring out the index of performance. And here you can see the top 10 cars on this index, which is like a handicap system. It's based on past performances in each of the 4 different classes, and then they are given a bogey time, a par if you like, and the more they can exceed it, the better they'll score in their index. Now, it is supposed to favour the smaller cars, but that's not the way it's working out. As you can see there, it's the leader of the race himself, Peter Brock, now with Jim Richards at the wheel, who's done best because of the index figure, purely and simply because he's gone so quickly. He's gone faster than the handicappers thought. In 4th place is the car just swept through the corner then, which was Peter Williamson's Toyota Celica, and doing best of the smaller cars. Number 8 going through, and the Unipart colours is Barry Seaton. He'll have Don Smith driving with him. Barry has won this race before. He's been in the pits for a fair sort of stop and lost quite a lot of time in there when he was up in the top 10. Seems to have the car going pretty well now. And he's a man who prepares his own car, has been driving for many years, a very fast, reliable, unspectacular, but winning sort of driver.
Evan, when the Sebring race in the United States was initiated back in 1951 or 2, whatever year it was, the overall first prize money was given to the index of performance winner, not to the car that finished first. And for 2 years, the race was an index event. And in the States, they have 1. If you make your index, you're at a 1. If you exceed it, you're at a 1 point something. And if you don't make it, you're at a 0.9 or 0.8 and so forth. And that was a very, very interesting competition because of the great variety of the automobiles in those early days of road racing in the United States. So we're familiar with that index of performance. Here, is there prize money for the winner on index?
Oh, yes. Yes, there's, said he, not being sure, $3,000, I think it is, for the index of performance. There's quite a lot of money involved. We brought it in last year for the first time, along with the Rookie of the Year award, which Unipart, the people who are sponsoring Barry Seaton's car we've just been following, sponsor. That's worth $2,000. So it's come in, the idea being to try and boost interest in the smaller capacity classes. Unhappily for that sort of theory, Peter Brock won it last year too, and he's well on the way to doing the same. He just seems to confound the handicappers and get better and better and go faster than he should.
Speaking of the Rookie of the Year, Evan, an old friend of mine, Graham McRae, is here. In 1973 at the Indianapolis 500, that was our bad year. It rained, the race was delayed, we had some bad accidents. Graham was Rookie of the Year, and he's proudly wearing that blue jacket. It's a beautiful leather jacket that is given to the Rookie of the Year every year in the United States. He's wearing it around the pits, and he told me he's looking for the Rookie of the Year award here. And I said, so Graham, you know, you're going to be a gray-haired rookie if you make it. He says, oh, that's my life, is going around looking for a place to be the Rookie of the Year. How is he doing in that battle right now? Do you know, Evan?
No, we haven't seen the printout. We're getting the IBM printout at the moment as far as the index of performance is concerned. The Rookie of the Year is a little harder to assess. Normally, we only decide at the end of the race itself rather than keep it on the IBM computer. We just wait and see what the result is. We'll check that through, though, and see how he's going. We'll soon find out how Graham McRae is running. The classes at this stage, though, Chris, in the small class, 1600cc, it's Alan Goff in the Gemini, from David Selden in the Gemini, and Jim Fanico in the Gemini. With the loss of Mark Hatcher in the Toyota Levin, of course, we've lost the car that was acting as the hare, and it's the hounds that are out now, and the GMH car park that Peter Williamson referred to has become pretty mobile and running first, second and third in that class with Alan Goff leading. In the 2-litre class, it's Peter Williamson in the Toyota Celica, leading Derek Bell in the Alfa Romeo Alpetta, the Brian Foley entry, and Frank Porter in the second Alpetta is running in third place. The same sort of position which they've been running for most of the race.
You know, I watched Williamson, of course. We all have seen his driving because his car has our camera in it, and I'm just wondering if that has spurred him on to greater heights, because he's really been doing a fantastic job out on the racetrack, as you can see through his windshield. There he is now. Come on, Peter boy. And for an American, it's a great shot because the camera's on the left side of the car, which is where we sit when we drive. And here in Australia, the drivers sit on the right-hand side. Now, Williamson is operating with a 50-pound weight handicap because of that camera equipment in the car, and to be leading his class with an extra 50 pounds, which is a lot by motor racing standards. You see him drilling holes in little pieces of metal to lighten it up to go on a car. I think he deserves an awful lot of credit, and he's given us some great pictures here. He's liable to get some sort of an artistic award at the end of the year.
I think he's heading for the local equivalent of the Academy Award.
That's
we
right.
call it a Logie. I think he might get it for the best high-speed television performance of the year.
Yeah, certainly fastest sportscaster of the year. 68 laps completed in the race. The Peter Brock, Jim Richards combination, including practice and qualifying, have earned so far $16,500. Shooting for that 55.5 of last year, which they look though they're going to pull off again this year. Interesting, Alan Grice in second place was 1 minute 9 seconds behind the race leader 10 laps ago. 1 minute 3 seconds behind the lap leader 2 laps ago. So Grice is making some forward motion at trying to catch Richards before Brock steps back into the car, giving a problem then that Alfredo Costanzo then has to come out and run the second leg for Alan Grice, and Peter Brock climbs in fresh as a daisy to get back on with the job.
I had quite a chat with Costanzo yesterday, and he explained that touring car racing is really alien to him, he being an open wheel specialist, and he said that today's event would in a sense be a learning process for him. He said it's driving one of these cars compared with driving an open wheel formula car is like driving a truck. You turn the wheel in a formula car and it makes a very brisk and immediate turn. You turn the wheel here and you wait a while for the thing to get motoring. And he said the strangest transition for him was the body roll, the roll from side to side of the cars in the corners. It really was hard for him to get accustomed to, because in formula cars you don't have that.
We're watching the driver's view, or almost the driver's view of the car. It's the sort of view that Dick Barber might have got had he gone on the track. Well, he didn't go on the track. Instead, he's joined us here, Chris. You might like to talk with him in the commentary box. A disappointed man, I think, is our friend Mr. Barber.
A little frustrating, gentlemen. I know. What's bad about Dick Barber, he's not going to show his disappointed emotions at not getting a ride here. How many miles is it, Dick, from where you came?
Oh, boy. They're across the water, Chris. Long ways, but I'm certainly happy to be here anyway.
Yeah. When you drove the car in practice, how did it stack up to your expectations?
Well, we had a few minor problems, Chris, in the wheel, or the tire hitting the body of the chassis, so we had to do some modification, but the car shows tremendous potential here. It has a lot of power up the hill, tremendous speeds down the hill. We were easily able to come right up on the rear end of the Tiranas, so with the proper brakes and some development time, the Camaro is going to be a car to be reckoned with here.
You might, I was going to say, I'm sorry, Chris, you might talk your way around the track. We're following Peter Williamson's car. Now, you've had enough runs around the track to get an idea what it's like. Maybe you could just describe it to the viewers back home, what it's like in the left-hand seat, which is where you should be.
Right. Well, it's certainly an advantage to in my thinking, being in the left-hand seat, because the course does go counterclockwise to the left. Right now we're following the factory Holden, going down the hills through the switchbacks, which is very similar to a course in Germany called Nürburgring. Quite a driver's course. There's no room for the amateurs out here that are, if you really want to go fast, you have to have a very delicate balance. As you can see, there's tremendous concentration required. Now we're going on to the fast downhill straight, Conrad Straight, I believe they call it, and I believe the speeds get up to around 165 miles an hour. Now, a lot of concentration is required here because you come over the hill and there's some slower cars sometimes right in front of you, and you have to make some abrupt moves to clear them. So as we go down the hill, we're concentrating, checking our gauges, concentrating for our braking point. I think this is the 500-foot marker coming up here. we go a little bit farther and we come to the 300-foot marker, and you want to brake smoothly, downshift into third gear, continue to brake smoothly, downshift into second gear, come to the inside on the apex of the turn there, let the car drift all the way to the outside, full on the power, accelerate smoothly, stay to the right side because we have a fast left-hander coming up. Right about here, we'll start getting on the brakes again, downshifting back to third gear, back into second gear, and on up the hill.
Dick, does it ever get monotonous in one of these long-distance races like Le Mans, where you were second with Paul Newman?
Well, not really, Chris. There's a tremendous amount of concentration required at all times because of the tremendous speeds the driver has out here. I would say that, if anything, it's more exciting than a sprint race because of the tremendous strategy and the demands on man and machine.
Can you really rest on a long straightaway?
No, really, you have to watch the gauges, and you might relax the grip on the wheel a little bit because you're not doing any turns, but every bit of the course demands your maximum attention. Otherwise, you're going to make a mistake.
The voice of American Dick Barber, one of the unlucky runners in this year's great race.
Back here live at Mount Panorama at Bathurst, and here we have Steve Masterton moving up in the Masterton Holmes Capri, taking the left-hander onto Mountain Straight once again. Steve was Rookie of the Year last year, and at present is leading his class in the number 52 Capri from the Maticus Leeds car, and of course the Nelson Farrell entry.
Well, the class certainly does show, Mike. We have the Rookie of the Year program in the States. I hate to keep referring to stateside racing, but from a standpoint of your type of sedan racing, that's all that I can equate it to. And every now and then, some truly great ones. Surface Mario Andretti, for example, was Rookie of the Year in his first Indianapolis ride. And of course, last year he was the world driving champion. And still one of the great drivers. I would love to see Mario come here and race on this circuit in a well-prepared car.
What do you think of the circuit, Chris, we'll go back to our, just running off our 3-litre category. Position 3 is the Nelson Farrell car that I mentioned. 4, the Jones Finnegan entry. 5, it's the Shield entry. Number 6, right through until 10. We'll read those out for you.
Great variety of brand names, nameplates.
Exactly. It's a race that a lot of the people with very, very small budgets save probably 12 months to come back here again next year. Might only run a couple of races during the course of the year. I was getting it earlier. You've been around the circuit and you've taken it in. You've covered a lot of the Grand Prix circuits for World Championship for American television. How does this rate, in your opinion, as a potential site for a Formula One championship race?
Well, I think that the contours and configuration of the track are excellent because what does place a demand on the driver. The current political status in Formula One racing is to have high steel fences all around both sides of the track, which to me takes away from the character of the event. Like right there, that shot there, the Formula One set would want guardrails down both sides and probably all those trees cut down, which would really be a sin and a shame in my view. Yeah. But unfortunately, that's the trend, and I would hate to see Bathurst made so antiseptic a circuit. Just have a Formula One race here. I think you're better off with a great sedan race like this. Exactly.
Thank you, Chris. Steve Masterton completing another lap as he heads for a class win potentially here at Bathurst today in the Hardy Ferodo 1000. A very likable young man is Steve Masterton. He seemed quite surprised last year when he won Rookie of the Year. He's a protege of Barry Seaton. Barry Seaton has done a lot to help this young man's career, and of course the family, the Masterton homes, of course, are well known within New South Wales. In fact, as you'll notice when we cut to it, Steve Masterton, quite a good-looking young guy and a fellow who has his head put on the right way for motorsport.
Second year at Bathurst. The car that we're driving is a Capri Mark II hatchback, European Capri. The car was prepared by Barry Seaton. Last year we drove a Capri Mark I, also prepared by Bo Seaton. Phil Lucas was my co-driver last year and he's also driving with me again this year. We were lucky enough to win the 3-litre class last year and also lucky enough to win the Rookie of the Year. Unfortunately, I can't win the Rookie of the Year again because it's only something you can win once. I think the biggest problem we've got this meeting is lack of semanticus. and I would say Laurie Nelson. They're both driving European hatchback Capris, which are very competitive. And we've run the car the last 2 days, and the lap times have proved to be very good. We're trying some new tyres. Brakes are superb, and I can't see any reason why the car will not finish the race. The new Mazda rotaries are going remarkably fast, particularly down the straights. We're clocking speeds of 143 miles an hour, and these cars are passing us. So we're not out to try and run in first position all day, but I think our car will be there at the end. The Mazda rotaries are a little savage on fuel, which does require an extra fuel stop. But we'll be making 2 stops only, changing tyres on the last stop. Only the first stop will just be fuel and driver change, and just run the race. Mainly, I think, concentrate on sitting back in about 3rd position till half a day, half the meeting, and then start and wind her up a bit.
That's terrific. Yes, a great piece there from Steve Masterton. As you can see, he was giving Jim Keogh plenty of gun-ho treatment over the top of the mountain. Weather conditions here at the moment about the same as they were early. 4 seasons and 1 race in 1 day. It's starting to spit rain again down along the pit straight. Looks like a light shower up the one side of the mountain, and it's dry down the other. Steve Masterton once again completes 1 more lap. Probably the most dramatic part in the last 15 minutes of this race has been the fact that Jim Richards, as people at home are well aware, I waited to see whether or not he had a tyre problem. That was a late change from 1 lane across the racetrack. Anyway, Alan Grice, who has been tailing the Marlborough Holden dealer team. Yes, it was a tyre for Steve Masterton. It must have gone out just before he turned to come onto pit straight. And he took what officials would term some very, very late action in just turning across the circuit into pit row. They're going to put some more fuel in while they're here in the pits, change the tyre. No, doesn't require any more fuel, no driver change intended there. But Alan Grice, to get back to the real story of the race in the last 15 minutes, Jim Richards is out in front, co-driving, of course, for Peter Brock in this particular stint. And Alan Grice has made up almost 1 minute in 2nd place on the race leader, Jim Richards, and is closing. Here we have the situation of the Masterton Holmes car. Set to change their wheel. The gap from Grice to Moffat is 1 minute 07 seconds. Moffat is in 3rd place. Little of the overflow of the gas coming out. Quick pit stop was probably intended later, but they're out and back in the race. Steve Masterton going out at approximately the same time is Charlie O'Brien in the Phillips entry, the Tirana number 21. Here's Alan Grice. And Johnny Goss, of course, a former winner of this race, a man who, of course, won the Australian Grand Prix and the Hardy Ferodo. That will go down in history. Not too many drivers have done that, probably not too many will. Bobby Morris, this number 7 car, of course, which has been in the back of the pits, has now come out on pit road, but has stopped momentarily. And they'll be back on the racetrack with Dieter Quester at the wheel very shortly. In fact, just taking off now, out of the pit area goes Dieter Quester. The first few laps he's officially turned in the Hardy Ferodo in 2 years of trying to at least put 10 laps on the clock here. John Goss, as I mentioned earlier, has won this race previously. He's back out there after an earlier problem this morning. He wrote the car off, or at least the front of the body off, in a shunt here with the fence 3 days ago, and back out doing a good job for his sponsors, K-Tel. Actually, he's come back through the field.
Mike, I noticed the flags over the pits are standing out straight from their staffs with the wind blowing it to the left sides of the cars as they come down that mile-long Conrad Straight. I don't know how stable these cars are in the wind. Might this be a problem for some of the cars at those speeds coming down the straight?
I think the problem would be in the small car category. Most of the drivers who have been here previously in the Tiranas and the Fords talk of being shifted offline a little bit just before the hump. But fortunately, we've never had a serious accident in that particular part of the circuit. Noticing what you were just saying about the flags, the way they're flying, if you look out to the right out there, there's some more rain out there that's going to be moving in on the circuit probably within the next half hour.
We had a chat yesterday with Frank Gardner, who's a former Australian racing great who now serves as a team manager. And we got to talking about wind and slipstreaming and closing speeds. And he said that one day at Le Mans, he was slipstreaming Dennis Hulme down the back straightaway at about 235 miles an hour. And suddenly they came upon a very small French Citroën in the smaller classes. And they separated and went by the car on either side. And the turbulence created by their leading cars was such that the Citroën overturned just in their wake. He said the French didn't like that at all because that was one of their pet cars. But so wind of one sort or another is a problem on the circuits.
Correct. Chris Economaki. John Goss completes another lap, and he's still in there and running. And there aren't too many of the Fords who have survived. Alan Moffat, of course, in third place. And at this particular time, at 6 minutes after 1, Alan Moffat's race last year was almost run. So Moffat is still in there. He's in third place. He hasn't put any pressure. He's 1:06 behind Grice. Grice is 55 to 56 seconds behind the race leader, Jim Richards, co-driver for Peter Brock.
You know, this is the first time since 1974, the records show, that Moffat has not led this race.
Correct.
So he's going to have to do some going if he wants to get up front.
Henri Pescarolo, who has been here to Bathurst, the great French driver who John Goss has a lot of faith in, is at the wheel at the moment. Goss has turned the car over to him. It's a little different in weight to most of the cars that Henri drives overseas. I think he's just happy to be out there and running for the sponsors, K-Tel, at this stage.
You know, Pescarolo is a remarkable man, Mike. He told me his story years ago as how he got into motor racing. He decided he wanted to be a racing driver. So he went to the Matra Works to apply for a job as a mechanic, which is the way one would start in those days in France. And there was no work. So he said he would do anything to get into the Matra concern. And they said, well, the only job they had open is a job for a woman manning the telephone switchboard. He said, I'll take it. And Henri Pescarolo's first job with a racing-oriented company was a switchboard operator at Matra. And he worked his way from there into the race shop, and the mechanics, became a driver. And of course, you know, he's won at Le Mans. He's had a very, very monumental accident that left him with burns, which is why he wears a beard on his face. And one of the nicest men I've ever met in international motor racing.
A tremendous man. Positions so far, let's call up our IBM to have a look at outright for the moment. The Peter Brock, Jim Richards combination 05 for Marlborough Holden dealer team, of course, leading the race with 75 laps completed. In second place, Alan Grice and Alfredo Constanzo, who has yet to take over the wheel, 75 completed for second place. Third place, still showing at 75 for the Charlie O'Brien Garth Wigston car, the Tirana. It has had one more pit stop since then. In fourth place, Alan Moffat and John Fitzpatrick. Fifth place, the Peter Jansen, Larry Perkins car, still sitting there. They look as though they will be around at the finish. In sixth, of course, the Radburn Smith car. In seventh, Gary Rogers and Bob Stevens. In eighth place, the Tirana of Bob Skelton and Don Holland, doing well. In ninth place, the Scotty Taylor car with Kennedy. That's back in ninth. And for 10th overall, the Sampson, of course, of Sampson and Brown. Goes up the straight, and the news in the timing of the front running two cars in the race. As I gave you before, 56 seconds was the gap between the race leader Jim Richards and Alan Grice. Scratch that out. It's down to 47 seconds. And we'll show you more of it. The great race, the Hardy Frodo 1000 from Mount Panorama. Lacus Maticus and Jeff Leeds, first in class in the 3-litre category. Stopped, motionless. And all their hopes of winning the class 3 litres here at Hardy Frodo have gone. The driver, of course, has walked away from the car. There'll be no use sitting in the car there. It's parked once again in a very, very difficult part of the circuit for other drivers. One wonders what's going through the way. A lift, perhaps? I don't think so. Acknowledging the signal from another driver. So the Maticus Leeds car, first in the 3-litre class, was first in the 3-litre class before Masterton took over, is out. Frank Gardner, one of the top racing drivers of his era, is in the pits to talk to Evan Green.
Well, the race has entered a fascinating stage now, Frank Gardner. Your car 47 seconds behind Jim Richards, but you're going to have to get Alan Grice to pull the Craven Mile car in and hand over to Alfredo Costanzo. What will you be asking Alfie to do?
Alfie knows he's under a lot of pressure. He has to go as hard as he possibly can and keep the car on the road, obviously, look after it, but try and maintain our position and keep the pressure on the Holden dealer team. We don't intend to pass them, and we haven't got the ability nor the equipment to pass them, but if we keep the pressure on them, it's not easy for anybody lapping in the times that both cars are lapping in, so it only needs either car to stumble, of course, and the race is all over for one or the other. So we're not in a position, as I said, to lead the race, but applying this constant pressure is certainly keeping them on their toes at this point in time.
A tremendous load on a driver who hasn't had any experience in touring cars. Alfie's a great single-seater driver. Is he going to be up to the job, do you think?
Well, Alfie certainly wouldn't be a Peter Brock in a saloon, but Alfie's a very talented driver. He's very adaptable. He's very responsive. He's a quick learner, does his sums well, and we're very pleased with him at this point in time.
Now we're watching Alan Grice go in the car. He's done a great job today.
Alan has been in the car over 3 hours. Driver's only allowed in 3.5 hours. That's a maximum time. And, you know, I'm in the process of going back to the pit now to pull the car in, take on fuel, and change the drivers.
What time is that scheduled for, Frank Gardner?
We expect to have Alfie in the car at around about 26 minutes past 1.
Right, so that is in another 11 minutes' time, and a very crucial stage of the race when Frank Gardner will call in this man, Alan Grice, running in second spot, and only 3/4 of a minute behind the leader, and hand over to the touring car novice, but top Formula 5000 driver, Alfredo Costanzo. Oh, he's going very wide there, Frank, and picking up a little bit of grass and dirt. Any special instructions for Alan Grice in terms of how he should drive?
No, Alan exactly knows what he has to do. He's got a lap time which we've set out. He's got to keep trying to get back to that all the time. You've got to appreciate these lads have been in the car for over 3 hours, and they're bound to get a little bit ragged as long as they don't get more than a couple of inches behind the accident. We're all right. It's when the fatigue sets in, they're bound to get a little bit ragged because there's been a hell of a pressure on all drivers, and Shepherd has opted to put Richards in, and Brock is having a rest, so we're really putting Costanzo against Brock, which is a bit unfortunate, but I think Shepherd's played his cards very well.
Why did you decide to keep Alan going for the double spell?
Because I wanted the traffic to be depleted to let Alfie get into a better rhythm, so he wouldn't have to worry about cars around his air hole all the time, and he could concentrate more on the driving and less on the slower cars, which are really the overtaking hazard. The discrepancy's about 40 mile an hour in a lot of places, and it's a pretty dangerous business.
Tactics then are a vital consideration in a race like this.
Yes, they are, and certainly you've got to have the equipment, and we're pretty pleased we're still out there because, as you know, Evan, this sort of thing can turn sour on you in a couple of minutes. The day you think you've got it all solved is the day you get kicked very severely.
Will you be changing tyres when you bring Alan Grice in?
No, we won't be changing tyres. We'll be leaving Alfie in. We may look at a tyre on our very last stop, but we're hopeful that we can go through all the way into one set of tyres.
What sort of information would Alan Grice pass on to Alfredo Costanzo when he hands over?
I would think after 3.5 hours in the motor car, very little, except to tell him the mechanical condition of the car. Pump the brake pedal and watch third gear. These are our only shortcomings at this point in time. But Alfie already knows this as I've briefed him. We've got a pretty good communication with Alan in the car. So Alfie knows exactly the mechanical condition of the car, so he's got to adapt himself to it.
Pretty diabolical traffic out there, and yet Alan Grice is threading his way through very expertly. What is the critical length of time, would you think, before a driver becomes so tired that he starts to lose concentration and efficiency?
Well, I know one year Pierre Levesque at Le Mans had done 22 hours and then sort of had to be a world's biggest accident, but up to that point in time, it depends very much on the individual.
So it varies from man to man. The man we're watching at the moment is Alan Grice. The man we've been talking to is his team manager for the Craven Mile team, Frank Gardner, who's now in a hurry to get back to the pit to organise things for what could be the crucial driver change of the whole race. Back to you, Mike Raymond.
Thank you, Evan. Of course, Alan Grice, this is a race that Alan desperately wants to win. I've noticed in the last 5 laps that Alan is throwing the car around more than he was an hour ago, and maybe if the concentration is off just a little or it's a little ragged. Alan Grice, of course, has never won this race. He looked at least a good chance of winning the recent Sandown 400 and wants desperately to win. And prior to coming to Bathurst, Grice had some very definite views regarding the sport and, of course, the restrictions placed on drivers and the finance required as opposed to baseball players, cricketers and footballers.
Very unfair sport in that, you know, to be a runner you need a pair of shorts and a pair of spikes, and a footballer, you get your Guernsey anyway. The club gives you your Guernsey and you just got to buy your boots. But motor racing's a lot different, and there's no clubs around that hand the cars out, and you've got to pay the bills yourself. And if you're not one of the fortunate few, you've got to beg, borrow, or steal, or earn the money yourself. And I became, you know, very totally committed to it. And when you're totally committed to anything, it should work. And you know, it's now a full-time occupation. I've got some very good sponsors, the best ones in the business, I think.
Well, we've been married 2 years. I've been involved with motor racing with Alan for 5 years. But out of that 5 years, Alan hasn't contributed anything to the household. I'm afraid the finishing off of the house will have to be done after Bathurst. But we'll just have to wait and see.
I'm very proud of the fact that although I own a lot of race cars and trucks, I don't own a lawnmower. And the only lawnmower that I hope to own, that's part of the plan, is one that hooks onto the front of the wheelchair, and when I'm 95 I might mow the lawn, not before. Well, there are 3 of us in the family. Sam is a pretty well-known sort of a Labrador dog, and he goes to all the meetings with us. Sam, hey, come here, come on. And he, hey.
He's a bit sleepy.
And he's about the same as us. He likes to get home after the meetings. He's been across the Nullarbor twice, and he's been to all the race meetings around Australia, and he likes to get home with us and go and throw himself in the swamp for relaxation and come back to the house. The house being so close to the workshop and having so many race meetings in the year, to get away, we really have to get away from the house as well, because it's just a walk down the hill to the workshop, and it's very close to a circuit. It's just through the trees from here, and you know, it's the if you're a golfer, you should live on the green so you can practice, and so you can be around your environment. And it's exactly the same with a race workshop. We haven't really seen the best results out of the workshop yet, because this is the first year, and it's been a capital year as far as setting the workshop up, which has restricted us in other ways with the team cars. Next year, I think you'll see the benefit of the workshop and the proper environment and approach coming through, and I think you'll see a lot better results from our team.
Alan Grice, who we met in that profile with his wife, Chris, a very, very determined young driver, a driver who has the sport at heart. He knows the expense of running a team. He runs everything himself, but he has very, very expert guidance from a very intelligent man in Frank Gardner. The rest of the cars coming through, of course, number 40. It has been running very, very well. It's the Terry Shield Mazda. it's been running surprisingly well. It had a spin earlier, but he's got it back onto the course, and it looks very, very well. Certainly looking very racy as it goes up towards the top part of the mountain with the Ford just in front of it. There's the aerial on top of the roof. Fastest pit stop for today, incidentally, as we pick up Alan Grice coming down through here with the Derek Bell car, was 19.0 seconds. Now that was to the Bell team, or to the Brian Foley team, I should say, when they called in to top up with gas. They didn't change tyres, but 19 seconds, in, out and gone. Very, very quick indeed. There's Derek, who drove here only a few laps last year, of course, in the Ron Hodson, the backup car, the second car. And the backup cars haven't really fared too well for the Hodson team. We lost Johnny Rutherford and Janet Guthrie 2 years ago, and Bell and Questa went out after only a few laps last year. And of course, Questa has returned. They've had a problem with the gearbox, and of course, Bobby Morris is out of contention for an outright win.
Talking about good pit stops, Mike. Steve Masterton in the Capri, and we think still leading that class at the moment, was running second at one point. They catapulted themselves into the lead by doing a 39-second pit stop.
That's right, with a change. Yeah. Very, very good. Now, they've done their homework well. There's our chopper shot as we come back to the circuit proper, and following Derek Bell through in the Brian Foley Alpha.
Some figures to hand on this battle at the head of the race between Richards and Grice. The gap over the last few laps, it's gone from 56 down to 47, back to 50, 50.2, back to 47, and now down to 46 seconds.
Yes, it's changing all the time. Peter Brock, of course, will be doing the last driving stint for the 05 Marlborough Holden dealer team. Impressive looking car, the Brian Foley car, as it comes up through the cutting. Derek Bell, not even interested in running with the bigger cars, of course, which he couldn't on the straight. But he's quite amazing. He's up to 15th outright in the race, and that is an incredible performance. 15th outright, and you'll remember Rod Stevens last year, in a little Escort, got into the top 10 easily, and we'll wait and see exactly how all the cards fall into place for Derek Bell and the Brian Foley Alfetta. From a point of view of money earned, the Marlborough Holden dealer team rubbing their hands. They have now picked up over $16,500. Now that has now increased to over $18,000 in lap money. Of course, they have led every lap of the race so far. Coca-Cola bottlers taking lap 1 through 40. They've added not only a bit of life, but also plenty of cash to the Peter Brock, Jim Richards effort. Ingersoll Rand, who support Alan Moffat throughout the year in touring cars, sponsored laps 41 to lap 80. Keeping in mind that each sponsor pays out $4,000 in lap money. It won't be too long before we're getting into the Penthouse magazine laps. That's laps 121 to 163. That's a while off yet, but here we have all the action that we've been waiting for. The change of whether or not they're going to come back from third to second. It has to be a very quick pit stop for Alan Moffat, and the driver change to John Fitzpatrick. There's Moffat. Let's stay on this action.
Plenty going on there too, Mike. The real problem here in the pits is getting the driver properly adjusted to the seatbelt. And while fuel is going in and they're checking tyres, and you can see the overall scene there, Moffat himself looked after the question of getting the belts around John Fitzpatrick, who's a taller, slightly broader built man than Alan Moffat. Fitz, who knows what it's all about, and that is a very quick stop, and that's a much better one than the last pit stop for Alan Moffat, where he had a rear tyre wedge, and he's on his way out now in a very rapid stop. So that was a good one for Alan Moffat. We'll be talking to him too in a little while. We'll get him from the pit area, and we'll have an interview with Alan Moffat. But in the meantime, it's John Fitzpatrick out there in a pit stop that should have gained them quite a bit of ground in this race. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you very much. On the spot. Okay, John Fitzpatrick, the man who teamed with Bobby Morris to win the Hardy Ferodo Classic for the Ron Hodson team, takes up the driving stint, not in a Torana, but in a Ford. And a smoother man, a fellow who can nurse a car around a circuit as he had to do back some years ago to get the Tirana, the almost crippled Tirana with a broken axle, home for a win in the Hardy Frodo Classic.
We'll be going in the pits too, I see.
Yes, the critical pit stop coming up, and we're going back to the pits.
Alan Moffat still wearing his earplugs. We'll be talking to him in just a moment, but he doesn't look too worried, bearing in mind that Alan always has a certain burden on his mind here in the race. In the meantime, a man who should have a bit of a smile on his face is Phil Lucas, because Phil, driving with Stephen Masterton in car number 52, the Masterton Holmes Capri, is leading the class. How's it going out there, Phil?
Well, we've got a few little problems, but I think so has everybody else. At this stage, we qualified the Capri first yesterday, and the car is actually the quickest Capri out there, and we are leading. But we've got one problem, and that's the Mazdas. The regulations have changed. They're a lot quicker in the straight line, particularly in the wet weather. They can make up ground in a straight line rather than sliding. Now, the Mazdas, if it stays fine, and it seems that it will, their problem's going to come in both the axles and the brake department. And we hope to have a few free runs from here on in. We've got one more pit stop to do, and that's it. We're home and hose.
Will you be driving the last spell?
Well, I think so, yeah. Steve's out there at the moment. We've had a problem with some fuel coming out one of the breather pipes, and I've had to come in. But I've done the wet weather sessions. Now Steve's out in the dry, and we're just going to wait and see what's going to happen for the last set of sessions.
Phil Lucas, top driver in the 3-litre class, sharing the Capri with Stephen Masterton. OK, back to you, Gary Wilkinson.
Thank you very much, Evan Green. And, still the race relentless at the lead. Jim Richards in the car number 5, the Marlborough Holden dealer team.
That's the action from Bathurst. We'll be back in a moment from Mount Panorama and the great race.
I said that a vibration had started to develop about 5 laps before I came in, and I couldn't analyze it, whether it was the diff or the transmission. The temperatures were fine, so I thought, well, maybe I'm hearing things or feeling things. I don't think so. Something's going on, but I'm not too sure what it is. But I doubt whether it would stop the car.
How do you feel about the race generally then?
I was disappointed about the puncture. That sort of dampened my spirits when I thought, okay, there was no catching Peter, and I don't even know what happened to Bobby Morris. But certainly the puncture put us back. But I seem to be going quite well in the wet, in the rainy patches. It changed from wet to dry about a half a dozen times, so I'm fairly well awake, I can assure you that.
We're watching John now driving your car around. Maybe you can just describe what the track is like and what has to be done on the part of the circuit.
We have to be very careful here because the brakes are still hot after the big stop at the end of Conrad, and we go through there in second and right slide to the outside of the circuit. The Bathurst City Council have done a great job repairing and fixing the track up there, and we're able to slide a little bit to the right. Accelerating up in second, third gear now, probably just thinking about pulling it into top. Yes, he'd be in top now. And now brake for the right-hander into third, and at the very last minute into second. Although the car stops, it has no brakes as such. This is no indictment against Hardy Frodo whatsoever. The pads get so hot that all the car does is sort of decelerate. It doesn't really pull up. And one of the things that was bothering me most was just exactly what John's just passed, that big semi-truck with a parked car on it. You arrive at them doing so many speeds, and they're standing there doing nothing. He'd be accelerating up in second, just picking up third gear. Now it goes into third beautifully here. Very quick through that left-hander. And the car really gets going along here on the approach to Skyline. Down a little bit of a dip, and now through a left-hander where it'll be sliding flat out in third gear. Up over this little rise, touch of the brakes, and then a little bit of a hard starter as he sees nothing. You see nothing there, and you just have to put on the brakes before this approach, which is the start of the S's and down into the dipper, which is probably one of the most notorious parts of track anywhere in the world, and certainly no chicken run. We stay in second gear here and accelerate right up to 7,000 RPM, sometimes a little bit higher. Around here, touch the brakes, on the brakes, all the way now, and hit it. Accelerate past the camel filters wall, and now into third, and very quickly into top. He'd be in top now, and there it is, the greatest sight in the world, Conrad State.
We've got an old sparring mate of his too, in Dieter Quester, the Austrian driver, right behind him, taking over from Bobby Morris. So we have 2 Europeans driving on behalf of 2 of the great Australian drivers.
Yes, well, Dieter Quester's a fine champion himself, native of Austria, does a lot of driving for BMW. In fact, John and Dieter have been co-drivers on many long-distance races in America, and I've driven with Dieter myself in Macau. There he is, a bit cheeky. The Tirana's lighter. They can do that sort of thing. You just can't do anything with the Falcon at the end of Conrad. You just have to press and pray. It might sound stupid, but that's exactly what we have to do for 160 laps.
Alan, if I could interrupt for 1 second, Evan. the problem that you said that you thought was occurring 5 laps ago, I suppose it makes you fairly satisfied that a driver of Fitzpatrick capabilities, if there is a problem, he can nurse a car. He won't take it over the limit.
Well, that's right, Mike. You remember how he brought Bobby Morris's car home in '76, and I doubt whether a lesser man could have done it. If something is developing after 3 or 4 more laps, he'll be well and truly settled into the car, and I'm sure he'll be able to nurse it home.
Alan, I know you've had a lot of pressure on you because everyone thinks of Ford. They think immediately of Alan Moffat, whether you're factory or whether you're private. And so far at this time in the race compared to last year, do you get some optimism going that you're around, you're still there, and things are going to be there at the finish?
I hate to agree with that, Michael. It's one of those things. I'm happy that we're in 3rd. We've got a chance. I think we could probably nail back the Grice team, but the other guys are just going like Cape Canaveral rockets, and I think it would take an act of God to stop them at this stage. And certainly when Peter gets a lead, he knows how to take care of it. He doesn't thrash the car. He doesn't get stupid. He just drives it as slow as he possibly can, and that's the way you keep motor cars together. For us to do anything now, we'd have to continue to push it hard or harder, and I don't think the car can take any more.
Thank you, Alan.
Alan Moffat, one final question. What sort of hazard is the traffic there? Because you have cars this year in 4 classes, and it must pose new problems to you.
I've only got one comment that I'd make publicly. There's a certain car out there on radial tires which I don't believe should be in the race. It's just a mobile chicane and causing, well, it's just a mobile chicane. I can't see the point in having it out there.
The rest of them, no problem?
The rest of the drivers are very courteous. They see you coming. I had my lights on. I see John still has the lights on, and they see you coming, and they move over very quickly.
How long a rest will you have in the pits, and what do you do when you're not driving? Can you relax?
Well, I seem to be quite relaxed right now, funnily enough. I had my little cool hat on today, courtesy of the Sheen Electronic Company, and I'm as cool as a cucumber. I feel fit. I could have actually gone on apart from the regulations that wouldn't allow me out there any longer, but I wasn't fatigued at all, and thanks a lot, fellas from Sheen.
Alan, how does our car cameras look to you in the monitor?
I feel as if I'm driving it here myself, Mike. I'm just still all revved up. We'll pass this truck doing, well, pretty quickly. We'll pass him. No, I think it's terrific. A realized view, if this is what everyone at home is seeing, it's exactly what we have to put up with. The tunnel of love, that Armco, it's all very unforgiving. Here we got to think very quickly about the brakes. It sounds, I keep on about the brakes, it's only because I've been mesmerized for 80 laps about hitting these fences. It's really an act to glide the car around and keep the speed up without having the brakes to do it as well as we'd like to.
Alan, you probably want a break, and we'll let you go, but we'll give you 15 seconds to get all the sponsors in.
I'm sure you've done that for me already, Michael, but if Federation can give us a little insurance now, I'm sure we'll finish, and I don't want to wish any ill luck on the other fellas, but something has to happen to them just to slow down a little bit, and we'll be up there again.
Thank you very much, Alan Moffat, who grants a most gracious interview after stepping out of the car, wrung out after carrying the Ford around in the wet and the dry here in the great race. And once again, back to the Peter Williamson Toyota. Of course, we have Peter's co-driver in at the moment. Mick Quinn, of course, not wishing to take anything away from Mick's driving ability, but Mick is very, very happy to say that he's a garbage man, and they call him Quinn the Bin.
After 87 laps in the Hardy Ferrado 1000, it's car number 5, the Brock Richards Tirana, with Jim Richards at the wheel at the moment, still piloting the field from the Craven Mile Tirana. Alan Grice and Alf Costanzo. Alf Costanzo now at the wheel just after the pit stop. Alan Grice was at the wheel for nearly 3.5 hours. Costanzo in his first flying lap, 2 minutes 33.5, and under these conditions, that's not bad. Charlie O'Brien, car 21, the Phillips Tirana, moved into 3rd place ahead of Alan Moffat's Falcon with John Fitzpatrick at the wheel, and that's a pretty good performance by O'Brien and Garth Wigston. I think Wigston driving at the moment because the car keeps jumping out of 2nd gear, but they figure it'll take longer to come in and change it than it does to put up with it.
There's that beautiful shot, the first, showing you the run down Conrod Straight, of course, which is known for this year as Breville Conrod Straight, sponsored by Breville, who support motor racing in quite a big way. Magnificent view. To all you people right around Australia, we had a call in one of the switchboards from a lady who prepared a quick barbecue lunch in Western Australia. She's been using Alka-Seltzer since we started showing the camera shots. Peter Williamson's car is 11th and still heading towards a finish in the top 10 and a win in the class.
And with Alf Costanzo at the wheel of the Craven Mile Tirana, he has closed the gap on Jim Richards in the Holden Dealer Team Tirana to 23 seconds.
Yes, well, that's the information we have. So Alfredo must be Superman. They'll name him Mario Costanzo after that, if that is correct, because they did a pit stop and must have lost a bit there. But the outright still held by the Brock Richards Tirana, which Gary has already given you, and they're still picking up all this lap money. The lap money given each year by Coca-Cola bottlers, Ingersoll Rand, and of course coming up from laps 121 through 163, of course by Penthouse Magazine. We'll take you back to Evan Green trackside.
The car we've been watching on the screen then is car 76, the Recar Gemini, which is leading the small car class, 1.6 litres. Kel Goff's driving alongside him and due to take over in no more than 10 minutes, his brother Alan Goff. How's the car going, Alan?
Good, Evan, really good. Going really good. No problems, except that the second place car is catching us up at 5 seconds a lap at the moment.
Who's that?
That's Gary Leggett in the Gemini. So it's all Geminis at the moment. There's nothing else in it.
You've got some pretty close competition then.
We have, yes. We didn't expect to be doing quite so well, but we're putting it. We're doing our best anyway.
What are your tactics going to be when you take over? You're the more experienced.
Get out and I think I can go faster than Leggett. I've been going faster than him. Although his is a Japanese car actually. His is all the other Geminis. My Gemini is an Australian-built Gemini, and Leggett's car is actually a Japanese-built Gemini. It has slightly different performance options. It should actually technically be a faster car, but I think at this stage my car is just a little faster than his.
And you're due to take over how long from now?
Well, he's catching my brother Cal up at 5 seconds a lap, and I drove for just on 3 hours, so I have to have a compulsory hour break. So at the end of the hour break, I'll be in the car again.
How much longer to go?
2 o'clock.
Right, so you've got something like 18 minutes to go before you're back in that car for the final spell. Any more changes, any more fuel to take?
We'll put on just a bare minimum of fuel, about 1 churn of fuel. Fortunately, we don't use a lot, and just allow a little bit up my margin. See, there's a car passing him there. Well, he should be able to stay in front of that car.
It's the bigger one. It's the Dolomite.
Yeah. You can see him pulling around the corner there, right up behind the Dolomite. The Gemini is only 1600cc. It's only got 120 horsepower, and the Dolomite would have, it's a 2-litre, and it would have a lot more power, maybe 180 horsepower, but the Gemini is a very good handling car. I'm making up all my time over the top of the hill. Not so much down Conrod or Mountain Straight, but across the top of the mountain.
So you're making it on handling?
Yeah, it's going very well, yes. Yeah.
I'm on the part of the circuit we're at now and following your car through now.
Yes, I'm not quite sure where we are, actually.
You're not used to watching the telecast. You get a different view through the windscreen.
I'm not used to watching.
Coming up towards McPhillamy here.
McPhillamy, yes. Well, he's in 4th gear. He's in 4th gear. Just that's McPhillamy Park there. He's coming down to the skyline. He should be right over, coming over towards the fence. He's going to brake hard. As a matter of fact, my Gemini is with about the latest braking car there. Coming down the skyline. He's being passed going through the... sorry, where are we again? There's the dipper, isn't it?
Right, it's a different view, Alan Goff, when you're not behind the wheel. Yeah. But you'll be there again in another 16 and a half minutes. We better let you go back. Taking the place, brother. It's time for us to take ourselves a bit of a break. Reminding you that you're watching from Mount Panorama, the great race.
Let's take you back down to Evan Green in the pits, and he's got one of the great characters of Australian motor racing sitting right alongside him, Johnny Goss.
One of the great characters, but not one of the very lucky drivers at the moment. He won in 74, having trouble almost ever since. How's the car going now, though, John?
It's going all right now, Evan. We had a practice accident on Thursday. I had a puncture in the right front at McPhillamy Park, which put me off the road, and a very heavy impact, and my chaps had to absolutely rebuild the car from the windscreen forward, and it's a hell of an effort in these few days. However, we've got it running again, and we discovered this morning, just before the start of the race, a hairline crack in the fuel pump. We didn't have time to change it, so we're forced to start. Unfortunately, we had to stop and change it. It cost us a bit of time, but the car is running well, and it's an experience to be back on the Bathurst circuit. Henry's out there now.
John, if we could just interrupt you for one moment. We have Peter Brock calling in for this, a very, very critical pit stop. I mean, Jim Richards calling in Peter Brock to do the last stint of driving. Jimmy Richards has done well. In fact, apart from all the lap money that he's picked up the Motorola Communications prize, the leading car at the 81st lap, I think. Yes, he has. And there you can see the churns of fuel, another tyre change. And John, if you can still hear us, yes, you could probably explain just how mentally spent a driver would be, like Jim Richards, with all that pressure on him, but he's brought the car in for a pit stop.
Right, well, Jim's just driven through some mixed conditions too. There's been some rain on the circuit along the top of the mountain, but I think the pace has been fairly comfortable for them because of the changing conditions. It hasn't been an all-out race at this time, but these men are using every bit of their mental concentration to keep the cars on the circuit, particularly along the top of the mountain, where we've only got a very narrow line to drive on, and just 6 or 8 inches deviation can mean that you're slamming into an earth bank at well over 100 miles an hour. So yes, they are spent, and any one of us are very pleased to get back to the pits and have a bit of time in our trailers.
Is your car, how is Henri Pescarolo enjoying the drive there?
Well, he's obviously pleased to be on the circuit, Evan. Unfortunately, we had this practice accident on Thursday, which has prevented us from doing testing, but this is really the first decent drive he's had in the couple of years that he's come here to Australia to join me. But he's excited about Bathurst. He was 4th fastest in qualifying in the 24 Hours of Le Mans just a few weeks ago, or a few months ago, and to him, the Falcon's a big beast of a car, unlike anything that he's ever driven in his 10 or 15 years in international motor racing. But he's adapted, and over the years we've developed something of a friendship, and I'm hoping to drive with him in Europe in a Group 5 Porsche this year. But there's Henri negotiating into the dipper. He'll be picking up first gear, climbing up there, and about now selecting second. He's driving the car carefully. I developed a technique for driving it to avoid detonation in the first section of the race. We talked on the radio, and I'm confident that Henri's classic experience will carry him through and help us to get the K-Tel Copra home.
You mentioned you may be driving in Europe. What sort of event do you have in mind in the Group 5 Porsche, John?
Well, Henri was telling me that they're trying to extend the Le Mans principle and develop other races around that particular event, so that there'll be more of a, let's say, a Le Mans type championship of makes over 4 or 5 events on Europe's classic circuits, and we're hoping to form a partnership and get a drive in that area.
Bad luck indeed for the Channel 9 crew. Of course, this is the Kevin Bartlett, it was to be driven by Kevin Bartlett, the Bob Forbes, John McCormick car, coming into the pits a little slowly. They've been out there for quite a while and doing well, but we had information that there could have been an engine malfunction, but we'll wait and see without saying that was absolutely official.
I think that these boys have done a marvellous job with both the Camaros. You know, very few people realise just what sort of a pitch of development these Australian touring cars have. They're unlike any other type of touring car in the world, and for these men to develop these cars to the Australian, very unique Australian regulations in such a short space of time was almost an impossibility, Evan, so I suppose they've done their best.
Yes, and I think they'll be very, very competitive 12 months from now, John.
Well, it's opened up a new possibility for Australian racing fans, and I think many of us are considering Group 1 as a possibility for 1980.
Good to see you back, John, and with a good sponsor and Henri doing so well.
Thanks very much, and we'll talk later.
And when that head of yours has pups, Gossie, I'll have one.
Okay, for all our viewers in Western Australia, Tim Slako still running very, very strongly. We'll have a look in a moment just exactly where he is running in class. We were looking forward, as we do each year here at Mount Panorama, to Wayne Negus being here, but unfortunately Wayne cannot be here. He's had some excitement over there on the racetracks in Western Australia, but he's a very, very popular competitor, and sadly missed this year at the Hardy Ferodo, representing Western Australia. We know we have a huge following with our telecast from the West, and Tim Slako still doing well, still up there, fighting away. It's a pretty tough event, and if you're still running at this particular stage of the race, you're in with a shot.
Slako Tirana from West Australia, car 13 at this stage in overall 17th position, having covered 80 laps, starting from 19th position on the grid.
Well, they're doing well. I mean, the attrition rate has been quite high. There's been the rain and the sun. We're just waiting to see if snow will fall in the final hour. The Four Seasons today. Tim Slako, I'm sorry, in that well-prepared number 13 Tirana hatchback. Nice colour scheme, and being well driven this afternoon in this final portion of the Hardy Ferodo. The Channel 9 Camaro being pushed down pit road on its way to the back of the garage area. Johnny Goss mentioned before, and I think we'll reiterate, it hasn't been the best of debuts for the Camaros, but not too many people could understand the short amount of time that the crews, both the Ron Dixon AWA and the Kevin Bartlett, Bob Forbes, John McCormick Channel 9 cars have had about 7 weeks to prepare a race car and turn it into a winner at Bathurst. That is an impossibility.
The Holden Dealer team pit stop we saw a few moments ago with Peter Brock now at the wheel allowed the Craven Mile Tirana with Alf Costanzo driving to close up a little bit of leeway. Both cars now on the same lap, but the dealer team car still about 2 minutes in front. That's a pretty commanding lead at this stage of the race.
Well, our people in sunny Perth, we hope today, the Sparkling Badiga entry, number 13, Tim Slako. And as you can see, the Tirana certainly very, very evident here today in the Hardy Ferodo Classic. Alan Moffat and, of course, John Fitzpatrick running the car for Alan at the moment, back in 4th place. Tirana's at this stage 1, 2 and 3.
From the word go, it's been the dealer team car 05, Brock and Richards in front, and they're just sort of picking up $100 a lap as they go. That now amounts to about $9,500.
Then add on the
plus the pole money of about the same.
9.7. That's 18.7, and they've picked up $500 from Motorola. 19. They're up around about getting in the vicinity of $20,000. Fitzpatrick. Car number 25, the Alan Moffat entry for Federation Insurances and, of course, Camel. Lights going just to let the drivers of the slower cars know when they look in the mirror that they have a roaring Ford coming at them from behind. Ford fans, I guess the John Fitzpatrick Alan Moffat machine is certainly a sight for sore eyes. It's still in there, it's in 4th, and it's running and not really showing any faults, any flaws, despite the fact that Alan said he detected some vibration. Okay, car number 25 goes through, John Fitzpatrick. More action to follow in the great race, the Hardy Ferodo 1000 from Mount Panorama.
Scott right up the top there, and a little dangerous manoeuvre, dragging half of the car along. Has certainly crunched something very hard.
Well, it's bad luck for the Queenslanders because as we mentioned earlier, that Dick Johnson has been almost the lone flag raiser for them in terms of being totally competitive in all the touring car championship rounds this year. Responses, Brian Bird Ford, and of course for Credit and 4BC in Brisbane, and for all our Queenslanders watching, that's not good news. The other Queensland Falcon driver, of course, Ron Wanless, co-driving with Leo Leonard, was one of the first forwards out after, we think, locking up an engine solid on the way to the top of the mountain, and Ron Wanless not getting a drive.
96 laps gone in the Hardy Ferodo, 67 laps to run. Total of 60 cars started. There are 40 left.
The action continues. just completing his driving stint in the Brian Foley outfit, is a fellow who I think would be much happier at this time of the year than he was 12 months ago this day. His name is Derek Bell. Evan Green to talk to him.
I'm sure that's right, because Derek didn't do too well last year, but this year the car's doing better. You're in the Brian Foley Alfetta, but you're not leading the class.
That's the thing that really disappoints me. We were doing so well in practice, fastest in both the wet and the dry, and we just can't keep up with Williamson. I've been working my butt off for 3.5 hours and still can't catch him up, so I'm very disappointed.
How far behind are you?
Well, we're about 89 seconds now. We were only about 16 when I handed over, but we had obviously a fuel stop, which lost us a bit, and we just are losing time all the time on the car.
Can you get close enough to put some pressure on him, do you think, or do you think he's now beyond reach?
Well, you'll never be on reach until the flag drops, but it certainly is rather an awe-inspiring amount of seconds we've got to catch up, and I'm rather worried about it.
What sort of condition is the track in?
Well, it's staggering, actually. The track is in very good condition, but yet I'm not doing very good times, not as quick as I should be. There's been a lot of oil out, and there's been a lot of rain. It rained a tremendous amount up on the top of the mountain, and then a bit more would come back again, and then there'll be some oil, and I mean, there's been some quite amusing, entertaining bits and pieces of driving going on up there.
Now, Derek, you're one of the most experienced as well as most successful long-distance drivers. How tiring is 3 hours at the wheel at Mount Panorama?
Well, in fact, in the little 2-litre, I feel in very good shape. I want to go and have some lunch now. Normally I get out of a car after 3 hours and I'm absolutely, well, wrecked. I won't use the other adjective, but I'm very, very tired, but I feel great, absolutely superb. The car is very easy to drive, and of course a lot of the corners, you know, are very fast, so it suits the car fine.
We're watching your co-driver now, Phil McDonald, there, making a passing move on an escort. The car is running nicely?
Absolutely, very, very nicely. There's a bit of bother with the brakes. We have to run a much harder brake compound here to make it last the distance. We have very, very small pads on the car, and unfortunately they don't get hot enough continually because of the great long straight and the mountain climb up here. The brake pads cool off too much, and so when we apply the brakes again, they incline to smear on the discs rather than actually they don't get to a working temperature enough. This becomes very difficult. I find I'm braking far too early.
What part of the circuit suits the car most?
Well, I suppose really through the tricky bit at the top of the mountain, you know, where the lightness of the car and the ability of the maneuverability of the car works very, very well. A big car, obviously, it's sort of on the brakes, off the brakes, and accelerate and turn, and whereas we can just flick it through the corners and little tight bends very well.
The part of the circuit that Phil, your co-driver, is now approaching. We can just see you're running in 15th place outright. That still is an exceptionally good place in a 2-litre car.
It's not too bad at this time of the race. No, I hope we've got to pull a few places up yet. But the car is running very, very nicely, and Phil is driving extremely well. He goes really well, I must admit. I was very pleased to see how fast he was. You know, great, really very good. He's just coming now into the S's, which is where the car invariably, you know, we can keep ahead of the bigger cars, and then into the dipper. And it's very, very good through there, I must admit. It goes a bit up onto 2 wheels there, but that's where I parked it last year, if you remember.
The year before, by common consent, you were the fastest driver, irrespective of cars, through there. You're still having a lot of fun, are you, through the S's?
Yes, I really have a ball. It's great, really fantastic. You really have to key yourself up for it.
Derek Bell talking around the top of the mountain in the Brian Foley Alfetta, running 15th outright, second in the class, and a fairly long gap to the class leader, but with so many laps to go, anything can happen in this Hardy-Ferodo 1000. Now it's back to Mike Raymond.
Thank you very much, Evan, and thank you, Derek. Good to see.
That class is still Peter Williamson, Salika, with Mike Quinn now at the wheel. They're running 11th outright, leaders in the 2-litre class, and Mike Quinn circulating in around 2 minutes 42 per lap, which is about a second and a half off the pace that Peter Williamson set in his fast talking laps.
Yes, Peter Williamson quite remarkable, not only leading 2 and 3, much faster than some of the 3-litre cars that we've seen here today. Our IBM scoring system, which is always spot on, will enable to carry the current placings after the number of laps recorded against. So if you're following a particular driver that we have erred in mentioning, at least you can see where he is running in the race. It's quite difficult trying to keep up with every particular driver in the field, but we're doing our best. The lead still held by the Marlborough Holden dealer team. My goodness me, are they consistent. Peter Brock, Jim Richards, impeccable.
Leading now by 2 minutes and 16 seconds on the Craven Mile Tirana. The driver at the wheel there is Alf Costanzo, and on his last lap, 2 minutes 28.6.
Phil McDonnell again coming up through the top part of the mountain in the Brian Foley Alfetta, and a little golf going through that we haven't seen much of. Number 73 waving. Okay, more action in the pit area. Evan Green is Johnny on the spot and has another interview for us. Take it away, Evan.
Thank you. Well, the number one driver in the VW Golf is Chris Hire, who's just come out of a spell in the car. You've had a few troubles with the Golf, which is not the way that the VWs usually go. What's been the problem, Chris?
We had a clutch change early in the day, Evan. It started to slip sort of early in the event. Had a little bit of gearbox oil problems. We pulled it out and decided we'd rather change it than sort of put it away, which we were glad we did. Currently we're lapping about 10 seconds quicker than Alan Goff, who's leading the class. Peter's in the car at the moment. He said it's handling very, very well. So we're sort of hoping we'll just hang on in there.
Tell us a little bit about the Golf. It's a GTI model, isn't it? You might explain just what that is.
Well, the GTI version is the only one sort of available in Australia. There's two that we know of. The one that came out for Andrew Power, plus our own vehicle. Lennox Motors brought it here in 1976, which was specially put together for us. We've been running the same car ever since. Done a lot of work. It's basically fuel injected. The brakes are different. Suspension works a little different. It's sort of got about 140, 150 horsepower. Over and above sort of the 110 that the GTI has standard. The standard Golf that comes from Australia probably turns out about 80 horsepower.
What's it like to drive around the circuit? What are the good points of it?
Well, we found it a little bit hard to believe, but on paper, working out with our gearing, our tyre size and everything else, the other day we were doing 148 in a slipstream. So down the chute, it's very, very quick. It suffered a little bit going up the mountain because of the gearing that we had in it. We changed it last night, and it seems to be working pretty good now.
Did I see a puff of smoke coming from the car then?
He's probably just trying it a bit hard. We've got a left-hand brake. Because the car's very light in the left rear, it tends to sort of cock up a wheel very easily. Once that sort of gets off the deck, well, we're in trouble. But Peter's sort of doing his job properly. He's been told to sort of get out there and give it all he can at the moment. So if it holds together, beaut. If it doesn't, well, at least we've had a good run.
Well, let's hope that the VW Golf does have a good run. There's the smoke there and just puffing it. Maybe a gear change?
I hope so.
What are you going to do during your break away from the wheel? What do you do to relax?
Pace up and down the pits and watch it. It's pretty hard to relax, Evan. You sort of go and try and have a cup of coffee and a sandwich or something, but it's very, very difficult. You just sort of sit and wait and hope the thing comes back for you next time around.
How much work has gone in far as you personally are concerned in getting ready for this race?
Well, it's something that the boys work for all year. It's an annual event. I think everybody sort of works all year, mainly for Bathurst. We spend lots and lots of hours because the car's a little different. It's the only one running. We found it's a lot harder to get parts, get associated bits and pieces together from Germany. We find we get a lot of help from the factory. By the time you air freight it out here, get it on the vehicle and get it tested and get it sorted and get it running properly, you spend a lot of hours and a lot of money. We sort of plod on there, and we're a privateer basically. We don't get a lot of help from Volkswagen, but Lennox Motors have done their job yet.
You had a bit of a disaster in the Hang 10 400 Sandown. Is this the same car that caught fire?
Yes, it is. We had there a fuel line runs right across the front of the vehicle, and with the turbo fan that the Golf runs, this fuel line had a slight fracture. Now, when the fan cut in, it pulled the air and the fuel through the front of the vehicle and just dumped it on the exhaust. It stopped sort of a matter of metres from the finish line. When they put the fire out, we sort of got it alone. So we're still classed as a finisher.
One of the outstanding small cars in the event, the VW Golf. We were just talking to the number one driver, Chris Hire. You're watching the great race. Before he came into the pits, let's look at the action replay. You see the tyre bouncing off into the bushes. Now Questa is on 3 tyres and 4 wheels and has to get into the pits.
Yes, and it's still there. It's, I would have thought by now someone would have been up there to get that off. We might stay on that if later, because that's really making it hard for the drivers who are battling concentration and weariness even at this stage to have that tyre still there.
You can see where it's happened, Mike. There's a man running for it now. Yes. It's right at the end of Breville Straight, which is not a a bad place to happen. It's reasonably close to the pits. He's brought the car in, hopefully with no damage to the front suspension. The Ron Hodgson mechanics are taking the opportunity to change all the rubber, or at least all the ones that appear to need change, the tyres, the back wheel being changed, as you can see. Bobby Morris is back behind the wheel. Dieter Quest was handed over, helped him down with the belt. It's a fairly long change, though, because of the damage to the front wheel, but a smart change, bearing in mind the nature of the damage they had to repair.
Still a fairly quick pit stop, considering that the crew were not really ready. The car wasn't due to come in.
In the meantime, the race leaders, car 5, the Marlborough Holden dealer team Toronto, with Jim Richards and Peter Brock, have completed 100 laps in this race. In second place, we have the Craven Mile, Alan Grice, Alf Costanzo, Toronto, and Alf Costanzo is at the wheel at the moment and doing a pretty good job too, when you consider that he's an open wheeler hot shot. Brock has in fact just lapped Costanzo, so they are a complete lap ahead at the present time. But Alf Costanzo doing a tremendous job nonetheless for his first drive at Mount Panorama, and should they manage to hold on to this second position in the race at this stage, well, certainly he'll be the funny thing to say for a man of Alf's motor racing experience, Rookie of the Year.
Yes, he's quite a colourful character indeed. Alfredo Costanzo, Formula 5000 superstar, and idol of many Italian motor race followers in Australia.
I'm on a learner in these touring cars. I've been racing for a number of years, but always in open wheeler racing. The last 4 years I've been concentrating on Formula 5000. So here today I'm only a learner, and I try and get as many laps as I can. And I'm learning as I go more and more around the track. It's a totally different technique to drive this type of cars. They are heavier, all the controls so they're not as quick that we have in open wheelers, like gear changes in open wheelers, so you can change it very much quicker than what you can change in saloon car races. The steering is more direct in the open wheeler, where this one they're very loose. The brakes, you know, the open wheelers are super much straighter than what these things do. But you'd be surprised how quick these cars are down the straight. You know, we clock over 160 miles an hour, and I tell you what, driving at that speed, you really have to concentrate. You know, they don't take that much to go out of control, so you've got to be on them all the time. And driving on the top of the hill, that is another place where your concentration has to be spot on all the time. You can make up a lot of time on the top of the hill, but you can also lose a lot. When I say you lose a lot, you can lose the car and hit a fence. So in other words, you know, your concentration has to be spot on all the time. I don't do very much driving because my teammate Alan Grice, he does most of the driving. So I guess there's not a great deal of responsibility on the top of my shoulder, because I'm only a supporting driver. But still, you know, those couple hours that I be at the steering, I have to do my part, you know.
Well, the man who may become the Rookie of the Year, Alfredo Costanzo, with me, another man who is certainly one of the outstanding newcomers of the year, but he hasn't been too successful. This is Mark Thatcher. Mark, what happened to your little Toyota Corolla live-in?
Well, Evan, we were running quite nicely, actually, and after about 2 hours, the ignition drive gradually got slacker and slacker, then sheared, and the car stopped up on the top of the mountain. We got the car back down again, and the mechanics worked on the car, and they got it out again, but unfortunately, the same thing happened, and it stopped up by the Hardy-Breda corner.
Well, at least you had the satisfaction of being leading in the class when it happened, which is not a bad way to go.
Well, yeah, it's very disappointing for it to have happened, because we were running exactly where we wanted to be in the class, exactly to plan, and all of a sudden pop, you know. But that's one of those things about a 1,000-kilometre race. You've got to be there at the finish if you want to do any good.
Well, you've only been racing since June. You've had a spectacular career. But Mount Panorama must be a new sort of circuit. How have you found it here on the mountain?
Oh, magic. It's been a fantastic experience, and I'm delighted to have come here. I'm very disappointed not to be driving at the moment, because I just love driving around the circuit. It's the most fabulous experience for me, and I hope that Peter Williamson and the Toyota team will ask me to come back next year.
So we're likely to see you?
Oh, if I get asked, I reckon it'll take me about a second to accept.
Well, let's hope the invitation is offered very, very quickly. Okay. Back to you, Mike Raymond.
Oh, thank you very much, Evan. Quite an interesting interview there with Mark Thatcher, who, of course, here for the first time, and I'm sure that the experience that he has gained will only make him keener to come back and link with the Peter Williamson team again for next year. A fellow who's out on the racetrack at the moment, running strongly, out of contention for a win, but still out there, is Bob Morris. He's taken over from Dieter Quester. Bob Morris, Australian touring car champion, a rather remarkable person. Bobby Morris has won both the Australian Touring Car Championship and the Hardy Ferrado 1000 Classic. He's what you'd call the total professional. But away from the racetrack and the glare and the publicity, Bob and his family like to escape into their own world, a real world.
I enjoyed my privacy away from the track because we're totally away from racing people, motor racing people, and I think it's good to be able to come home and enjoy yourself in the family environment without having exhaust pipes and things around. But by the same token, I do enjoy going to the circuit and enjoying my motor racing. I think as in any business or any sport, there are always a few people who aren't quite as nice as the rest, and I suppose there are a few downright rotters, but in the professional sphere of motorsport, I think most of them are basically there to make a living and to do a job, and it is business. But I think basically they're fairly down-to-earth, nice people. I think it's been a fantastic year for the Ron Hodgson Channel 17 as a whole, because we've finally won the Australian Touring Car Championship. The Adelaide Championship was a very difficult race, a very tough race, but I was fairly confident a couple of laps from home that Brock couldn't pass me. But it's a lot more than I can say for Bathurst 3 years ago. The last 5 laps were really nerve-wracking, with smoke coming from the car and standing in the pits really being unable to do anything except trust John Fitzpatrick's judgment and ability to bring our, well, virtually crippled car home to victory. And I hope that we can emulate that victory this year, but without quite so much drama. I find that pigeons are a relaxing hobby for me. I've had them for quite a number of years, since I was 7 or 8 years old, and I find them interesting and something totally different to motorsport and motor racing. They're live animals that have feelings, and they need looking after. I enjoy looking after them. I enjoy beating the toughest competition, and if I was second against the world champion, I would probably enjoy that a lot more than winning against an all-Saturn field. But I do enjoy hard motor racing, competitive motor racing, and I enjoy winning.
Bobby Morris, Australian Touring Car Champion, out and in pursuit of a placing in the 1979 Hardy Ferrado Classic. As you may recall, only a few laps ago, Dieter Quester at the wheel of the car, and in fact it threw off a tyre at the completion of Conrod Straight. Dieter Quester is in the pits, Bobby Morris on the racetrack, Evan Green to talk to Dieter Quester.
Well, Dieter, you lost a tyre there. What happened?
In the cutter, I went over a stone and damaged the rim, and so I had a flat tyre. Have to change tyre.
How did the car handle? Did you have a problem in controlling it?
No, it's really a shame that we are nearly out of the race, in fact, of the gearbox problem. I think the car was very, very well because I was doing times between 23 and 24.5, and this times to do was very easy.
Just watch Bob there. He had a very close call with a car in front. He's going fast. Is the traffic a problem out there, Dieter Quester?
Sure, you have to keep an eye on the traffic, and it's very difficult to pass sometimes the cars, even on the straight, when you're coming with high speed to pass a car which is nearly 50 or 80 kilometers slower.
Where are the most dangerous parts of the circuit from the point of view of traffic?
I would say it's the straight.
The path that Bob is just approaching now.
Right, because you're never sure if the car which you're passing have seen you.
Right, well, at the moment he has in front of him John Goss in the Proto Falcon. Now, that's a pretty quick car, but maybe he'll be catching him. Is there a problem with the big cars, or is it the smaller cars?
No, I would say the smaller cars are the bigger problem than the big cars. It looks like that the drivers of the bigger cars have more experience than the drivers of the smaller cars. And what I have seen, that the drivers of the smaller cars are driving always in the middle of the straight.
Where would you like them to be?
Pardon?
Where would you like them to be?
You see,
I don't mean in the pit.
No, for sure out on the track. And you see, I told you before, if we have this gearbox problem, it would look very good for us.
You think you could have won?
I wouldn't say that, because I think the car of the whole dealer team is a different car to our car.
In what way?
I would say it's the best car in the field, maybe more power. Not maybe, I'm nearly sure that the cars are more power. But anyway, I think we could be second, but the race isn't finished, so also the dealer car can break down.
What are your plans for next year? Do you think you'll be back again?
If I get an invitation, for sure, because I like this circuit very much, and I think there are only 2 circuits over the world which are so interesting, like this circuit, that's Nürburgring in Germany, and this circuit here, and I prefer these driver circuits more than I call them always retort circuit.
Well, now Nürburgring has been barred for much racing, including Formula 1, because it's too dangerous, and I've heard some people say that Bathurst is too dangerous. Do you like a circuit like this, which is challenging?
You see, I would say it's always up to the driver if the circuit is dangerous or not. That's right, that Nürburgring is closed at the moment because the circuit is too long and it needs too much money to make 22 kilometers safe enough.
Not quite the same problems here at Bathurst.
I would say the circuit is maybe a little bit dangerous than some European circuits, but these circuits are not interesting.
So it's interest that inspires Dieter Quester to his best drives then. You like the interesting circuits?
Sure, yeah. And I think you can show more that you're a good driver on a circuit which is difficult to drive.
What is the easiest part of the circuit?
I think the easiest part to drive, it's the straight. But the straight is dangerous in effect of overtaking.
Is there any point on the circuit where you can relax?
I would say no. If you have a fast car, you say if you're driving with 90 miles, you can relax. But if you're driving with 240, 250 or 260 kilometers, also on the straight, you have always have an eye on the road and on the surface.
Now, were you proposing to go back in the car again? Is Bob bringing the car back for a driver change, or is this the last spell?
I'm not sure if Bob is bringing the car back. I mean, if he's driving to the end or not.
Thank you very much, Dieter Quester. Back again to you, Gary Wilkinson.
Thank you very much, Evan Green, Dieter Quester, and on the track, car 5, Peter Brock, the Holden dealer team Tirana, still the leader with 106 laps down. We'll be back shortly with more action from Mount Panorama.
Of course, driven by David McKay, who I mentioned earlier today, and Spencer Martin, who hits the comeback trail. And here it is now going up to the top part of the mountain, almost like your everyday Volvo SVM 222. And that would stand for Scudero Veloci Motors.
Top 3 in the 1600cc class at the present time. Leading that class is Dave Selden in car 70, the Gary Leggett Gemini. In second place, Alan Goff, also in a Gemini, and Jim Fanico in a Gemini. Gemini's 1, 2, 3 in the 1600cc class at the present time. The 2-litre class, the Peter Williamson Celica, the leader, and 11th outright, by the way. And in second place in that class, the Alfetta of Derek Bell. The 3-litre class, Laurie Nelson in the Capri, the leader there. At this stage, Barry Jones, the Mazda RX-3, holding down second place in the 3-litre class, and Steve Masterton's Capri in third place.
Well, we've had a change there then.
Change there now, yes. Jones and Finnegan have moved into second spot in the 3-litre class in the Mazda, and Masterton, Lucas in the Capri in third place, but the leaders still Nelson and Farrell in the 3-litre class.
Well, looking quite nice coming over the top of the mountain. The Volvo, entered by David Mackay. on its steel cats. Heading down the straight, and there you can see Barry Seaton, who just pulled out and went zap. Car number 6, is it? That would be of some concern if that's the Alfredo Costanzo. The rate of the other cars went past a few seconds ago. Might pick up Evan. We're looking for the number 6 Tirana to come over the top of the hill down towards the pits. Not sure if we have any problems with the car, but the only reason that makes us concerned about it was the fact that the Volvo went past it. Okay, stand by, because Costanzo, I think, is coming in and he has some problems.
He's certainly got some problems. We haven't spotted just what it is yet, but you can see a real handling problem. Whether it's a tyre or not,
yes, it is.
Certainly slowed down. Looks like the back tyre just from here as he comes in. A bit hard to see in the pit area, but he's pulling into the pits. They certainly weren't expecting him, and in fact, he almost overshot the pits. You can see that rather extreme angle he's gone in. Alfredo Costanzo brings the car in. Now, this is a second-place car, and he's had tyre troubles. He's not going to get out, so he's going on a little longer. We were going to talk to Alan Grice, and unfortunately this has sent Alan scurrying back to the pits, a nervous man, to see what's gone wrong. If it's just a tyre and no more, he won't be so unhappy, but it might mean the end of their chances to overhaul the Holden dealer team car. Costanzo staying in the pits there. The tyre's been changed generally.
Grice is going back out.
Right, Grice is in. So we're not going to speak to him. He's gone back there. He's ready to go, all hooked in with a full system. His radio lead trailing behind his head. He'll plug that in afterwards. And Alfie, who's done pretty well out there.
I just can't help but feel, and meaning no criticism whatsoever to Alfredo Costanzo, but Grice had a good lead. Well, he was running strongly in second place and making ground on the leader. They've put in Alfie, who is running his first tin top race, so to speak, and now they're further behind. I just wonder whether or not the idea of sending Grice out or sending Alf out for what's to be the final driver session has really in fact backfired.
It may have been, although I can't really find any flaw with Frank Garden's tactics. I think he was dead right in trying to preserve Alfredo Costanzo from the heavy traffic. But maybe they were just a little bit out-generaled by the way that John Shepherd shuffled his drivers and put a lot of pressure on Alfredo Costanzo, so that he had Peter Brock, who was in dynamic form, against him and who stretched the lead a little more. That change has taken a fair while, so maybe it's going to be of academic interest, because it will take a little bit of time to get the damaged wheel off, and they're having trouble getting it off. It's jamming on, as you can see. There's real strife there in the pits. Now they're getting it off.
I'm just wondering, Evan, I wasn't being critical of Costanzo, but at the same time, when he came in, he had to unbuckle when he got in. He wasn't prepared to even jump out. And they've got a problem there, so obviously.
Yes, they've had the wheel off twice, so there's something wrong inside. We can't quite see. Our view is your view, but he's further back. Whether it's to do with the brake, the wheel is not going on easily. Something has been bent in there. Maybe the tyre flailing around has caused some damage.
Evan, you notice on the guard there, just a little to the left when we pull back out on that shot, looks like a scuff. There'll be no possibility that he's creased something on the way through?
He may have done that.
It's only a small one, as you can see.
Yes,
just
it
there.
May have been another car that has done it. They're getting pretty close at times, and that is probably the more likely reason, but who can say? And you can see the mechanics working there. There'll be a few blistered fingers, I'm afraid.
Yes.
You can smell the burning flesh from here. It is red hot under there, and they're required to dive in, fingers and all, and it's a painful business. They're dedicated men, though, and they're not too concerned about the pain of those burns, and they're trying to get this car out.
Perhaps we'll get a shot in a moment of Alan Grice just sitting there, and I just can't help but feel sorry for Alan Grice, who has had really a race against time, just sitting there wondering, could this possibly be going wrong? They've got second locked up. He knew that. That's going to affect the overall. That's going to bring the Weakston Charlie O'Brien car up, and it's going to pull the Moffat Fitzpatrick car up again.
Grice, second last year. Second this year wouldn't have been bad, and he wants to retain at least that sort of prestige. Alfie slips in to tell him something. The problem with Alan, of course, is he doesn't know what's going on. The work is out of sight. He's sitting up there ready to drive once he's told, and he's just wondering what on earth is going on. Why am I being held up? What is the problem? What is the problem? And he doesn't know. So Alfredo came up there, told him what they're doing, gave him an idea of how much longer he has to go before he can get back into action.
Well, that's really a pity to see them out of contention for for the lead or for a win, certainly, and the Marlborough Holden dealer team just running so well. One more lap put on the field by, or one more lap on second by Peter Brock would take him to three laps
Bryce
up.
And Costanzo. Certainly it puts Charlie O'Brien and Garth Wigston, of course, up into second spot now, and Alan Moffat into third place.
Well, you know, with all the problems now facing Frank Gardner as team manager, they've killed the engine. Brock goes sailing on by. I don't think anything could stop Peter Brock. I am really convinced that nothing will stop Peter Brock. Everything is just running so smoothly, and with a lot of other teams, they play their hand the wrong way by saying we're somewhat concerned because everything's going so well. But with Peter Brock and the Marlborough Holden dealer team, it runs well all the time. But bad luck indeed. We'll be able to give you a recap shortly on this unscheduled pit stop and just exactly what it has meant to the first 3 or 4 placings. Meanwhile, Gemini getting hoisted aboard the truck up in the top part of the circuit. That's still sitting in there, the car. Must be terrible for Alan Grice. Alan Grice, a fellow who last weekend decided to take 2 days off from the preparation. He left it to his crew. He has absolute total confidence in his crew to go away for a couple of days with his wife, Chris, just to get away from the build-up, the psych, the nerves. 7 days away from the Hardy Freighter. He was so confident. Something small has obviously gone wrong. Meanwhile, here's the man. Peter Brock. Car number 05, no problems. Smooth as silk.
How Peter is going, Peter Williamson.
Coming down Conrod Straight, there's the Moffat Fitzpatrick Falcon, the Camel Filters Federation entry. Doing very well, I would think, now advancing closer to third overall. The Garth